I was making bed in my small apartment when my phone rang with a call that would change everything. The caller was Ethan Montgomery, my lawyer, and his voice carried an urgency I'd never heard before. What he told me about my son's wife would shatter the happiness I thought we'd finally found as a family. In the next hour, I'd be standing outside my son's home, knowing that the woman he loved was about to destroy him. If you're watching this story unfold, please subscribe to our channel and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. My name is Madeline Foster, and 6 months ago, I believed I was living a grandmother's dream. My son Michael had married Isabella, a beautiful kindergarten teacher who seemed to love both him and his aging mother with equal warmth. When they needed help buying their first home together, I didn't think twice about using most of my savings to support their new beginning. After being alone for 12 years since my husband passed, having Isabella call me Mama Madeline felt like the family blessing I'd been praying for. That Thursday evening, I was getting ready for our weekly dinner when Ethan's call came through. I almost didn't answer because I was running late, but something made me pick up the phone. His voice was strained when he spoke, completely different from his usual calm professional tone. "Madeline, I need you to stop what you're doing and listen carefully," he said. "This is about Isabella, about your daughter-in-law." My hands went still on the blouse I was ironing. "What about Bella? Is everything okay?"
No, Madeline.
"Nothing is okay. The woman your son married isn't who she claims to be." I laughed nervously because the words seemed impossible. "Ethan, what are you talking about? I've known Isabella for almost 2 years. She teaches at Riverside Elementary. She volunteers at the animal shelter. She lost her parents when she was young and worked her way through college." "Madeline, there is no Isabella Torres working at Riverside Elementary. There never has been. The background check I ran for your insurance update showed that Isabella Torres, the person your son married, doesn't exist in any official records." The room seemed to tilt around me. I sat down hard on my couch, still holding the phone with one shaking hand. "That's impossible, Ethan. She gets calls from the school. She talks about her students all the time. When have you actually seen her at work? Have you ever met any of her colleagues? Any of her friends from before she met Michael?" The questions hit me like physical blows because I realized I couldn't answer a single one. Isabella always said the school had strict policies about visitors. She claimed her college friends lived far away and they'd lost touch. She said talking about her parents was too painful, so I'd stopped asking about her past out of respect for her grief. "Madeline, you need to get to Michael's house right now," Ethan continued. "Don't call ahead. Don't give them any warning. Just go there immediately and act normal until I can meet you with more information." "What aren't you telling me?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer would be worse than I could imagine. "I'm still gathering details, but Madeline, I think your son is in serious danger. Financial danger at minimum. Possibly physical danger too." I hung up and stood in my empty apartment, looking around at the simple furniture I'd bought after selling my family home to help with their house down payment. $43,000 I'd given them from the sale, money that represented 30 years of my life with Roberto. Money I'd planned to live on during my retirement. But seeing Michael's joy at finally being able to afford a home with the woman he loved had made every penny feel worthwhile. Now, driving through the evening traffic toward their house, I felt sick thinking about all the conversations where Isabella had gently suggested I downsize, move closer to them, contribute to their future together. Had it all been calculated? Had every warm hug, every Mama Madeline, every moment when I'd felt grateful for her presence in our lives been part of some horrible plan? Michael lived in a neighborhood I couldn't have afforded even when Roberto was alive, and we both worked full-time. The houses were beautiful, with perfect lawns and expensive cars in every driveway. Isabella had insisted they needed to buy in this area for the school district, even though they didn't have children yet. She said it was an investment in their future family. I parked across the street and sat there for several minutes, watching through their large front window. Michael was setting the table while Isabella moved around the kitchen. They looked like any happy young couple preparing for a family dinner. Isabella was wearing the yellow dress I'd complimented her on last month, and her dark hair was pulled back in the style that made her look even younger than her claimed 28 years. But now I was seeing everything differently. The house was decorated entirely in Isabella's taste, with no trace of Michael's personality anywhere. Where was the baseball memorabilia he'd collected since childhood? What happened to the photographs of our family that had always been important to him? It was as if Michael Rodriguez had been erased from his own home. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. More information coming. Be careful what you say tonight. Act normal but observe everything. I took a deep breath and walked up to their front door. Michael opened it with his usual smile, though I noticed for the first time how tired he looked. Not just work tired, but exhausted in a deeper way that seemed to come from somewhere inside. Mom, perfect timing, he said, hugging me tightly. Bella made that chicken dish you love so much. Isabella appeared beside him, radiating warmth and happiness. Mama Madeline, I'm so glad you could make it tonight. I was just telling Michael how much I've missed our talks. She hugged me with the same affection she'd always shown, and for a moment I doubted everything Ethan had told me. This couldn't be an act. Nobody could fake this level of genuine emotion for nearly 2 years. Dinner smells wonderful, dear, I said, following them into the living room. But now I was looking at everything with new eyes. Nothing in this room reflected Michael's interests or personality. The artwork, the furniture, the decorative objects, they were all chosen by Isabella. Isabella certainly has strong opinions about decorating, I commented carefully. Michael glanced around as if seeing the room for the first time. Yeah, she has great taste. She said my old stuff made the place look like I was still in college. But there was something in his voice, a note of uncertainty that I'd never noticed before. Where did all your things go, sweetheart? Your father's chess set? The photo of you and him at your graduation? They're packed away, Isabella said quickly. We're planning to create a memory room upstairs once we finish the renovations. Michael's past is precious to us. But Michael was frowning now, as if trying to remember when they'd made that decision. Actually, I'm not sure where some of that stuff ended up. I thought it was temporary storage, but... Don't worry about it now, Isabella interrupted smoothly. Let's eat while the food is hot. During dinner, I watched my daughter-in-law more carefully than I ever had before. Every gesture seemed suddenly calculated, every smile perfectly timed. When Michael mentioned a difficult day at work, she responded with exactly the right amount of sympathy. When he talked about his plans for a promotion, her enthusiasm seemed precisely calibrated to encourage him without appearing too eager. Michael, how much do you actually know about Isabella's background? I asked when she went to the kitchen for dessert. He looked surprised by the question. What do you mean? I know everything important.
Do you, though?
Have you ever seen her teaching? Met her principal? Any of her coworkers? She keeps work and personal life separate, he said, but doubt was creeping into his voice. The school has policies about family members visiting classrooms. What about her friends from college? Her roommates? Anyone from before she met you? Michael was quiet for a long moment. She says she prefers to focus on our life together rather than dwelling on the past. After losing her parents so young, she finds it healthier to live in the present. Isabella returned with coffee and cake, and I noticed how quickly she assessed the mood at the table. Is everything okay? You both look so serious. Just talking about work stress, I said with a smile that felt like it might crack my face. But Isabella's eyes had narrowed slightly, and I saw her watching us with an alertness that seemed different from her usual warm attention. She was evaluating, calculating, measuring our reactions in a way that made my skin crawl. Isabella, dear, I said carefully, I was just curious about your teaching. Michael never talks about visiting your classroom or meeting your colleagues. The district has very strict policies, she replied immediately, especially in elementary schools. Background checks are required for any non-employee visitors, and honestly, I prefer to keep my work and family life separate. It helps me be fully present for both. The answer came too quickly, too perfectly, like she'd rehearsed it. Of course, I said. That makes sense. And your college friends? Do you ever hear from anyone from your education program? Another pause, almost imperceptible. Not really. People drift apart after graduation. Everyone gets busy with their own lives. But Michael was looking at her now with a puzzled expression. What about Sarah? Didn't you mention her a few months ago? Something about her wedding. Isabella's coffee cup rattled slightly against the saucer. Oh, that was someone from my student teaching placement. We weren't really close friends. The conversation continued, but I could see cracks forming in Isabella's composure. Every question required a moment of calculation before she answered. Every response seemed designed to end the topic rather than encourage more discussion. When my phone rang, I almost ignored it, but Ethan's name appeared on the screen and I knew it was important. Excuse me, I said, stepping into the hallway. Hello, Ethan. Madeline, where are you? At Michael's house, having dinner.
Good.
Don't let on that anything is wrong, but I'm heading over there now with Detective Santos. We have more information, and it's worse than we thought. How much worse? Isabella Torres doesn't exist, but Catherine Morales does. And she's wanted in connection with marriage fraud cases in 3 states. Madeline, your son isn't her first victim. I hung up and returned to the dining room, where Isabella was clearing the dishes with efficient movements. Michael was helping, but he kept glancing at me with concern. Everything okay, Mom? Fine, sweetheart. Ethan just needed to confirm our appointment tomorrow. But Isabella had gone very still, and when she looked at me, all pretense of warmth had vanished from her eyes. For just a moment, I saw the person Ethan's investigator had discovered, cold, calculating, and completely without the love she'd been performing for nearly 2 years. I should probably go, I said, suddenly feeling very aware that we were alone in the house with a woman who wasn't who she claimed to be. Actually, Isabella said, her voice different now, flatter. Why don't you stay for a while longer, Mama Madeline? We have so much to talk about. The way she said my name made it sound like a threat. Michael was loading the dishwasher when I noticed Isabella hadn't moved from her position by the sink. She was standing perfectly still, watching us both with an expression I'd never seen before. The warmth that had always radiated from her face was completely gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. Isabella, are you feeling all right? Michael asked, noticing her strange stillness. I'm fine, she replied, but her voice sounded different. Sharper. I was just thinking about what your mother said earlier. About my background. I felt my heartbeat quicken. It was just casual conversation, dear. Nothing important. Was it? Isabella turned to face me fully, and I saw a stranger looking back at me. Because it seemed like you had very specific questions. Almost like you were investigating something. Michael laughed nervously. Mom's just being curious. You know how mothers can be. But Isabella wasn't laughing. She was studying my face with the intensity of someone trying to read a difficult text. Madeline, who called you just now? My lawyer, I said honestly, because lying seemed more dangerous than the truth. Your lawyer calls you at dinner time on a Thursday night? The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. Michael was looking back and forth between us, confusion clear on his face. What's going on? He asked. You're both acting strange. Before I could answer, Isabella moved closer to me. I think your mother has something she wants to share with us, Michael. Don't you, Madeline? There was something in her tone that made me take a step backward. Ethan had said to act normal, but normal wasn't possible anymore. Isabella knew that I knew something was wrong. Maybe we should all sit down, I suggested, trying to buy time until Ethan arrived. Actually, I have a better idea, Isabella said. She walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a knife from the cutting board where she'd been preparing vegetables. Not in a threatening way, but casually, as if she was still cleaning up. Why don't you tell us exactly what your lawyer said about me? Michael's face went pale. Isabella, put the knife down. You're scaring me. Am I? She looked at the knife in her hand as if surprised to find it there. I'm just cleaning up. Isn't that what good wives do, Michael? Take care of their families? I reached slowly for my phone, but Isabella noticed immediately. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Madeline. Not until we finish our conversation. Mom, what is she talking about? Michael's voice was rising with panic. What did Ethan tell you? I looked at my son. This good man who worked hard and loved deeply and trusted people, because that's how I'd raised him to be. He deserved better than this moment, but he deserved the truth more. Ethan ran a background check on Isabella for some insurance paperwork, I said quietly. There's no record of Isabella Torres ever working at Riverside Elementary. There's no record of Isabella Torres existing at all. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Michael was staring at his wife, waiting for her to laugh or explain or do something to make this all make sense. But Isabella was looking at me with something that might have been admiration.
Finally, she said.
Do you know how exhausting it is to pretend to be someone else every single day? To remember which stories I've told and which details I need to keep straight? Isabella, what are you talking about? Michael's voice was barely a whisper. I'm talking about the fact that your mother is smarter than I gave her credit for. She set the knife down but didn't move away from it, though not quite smart enough to keep her mouth shut. Who are you? I asked. Someone who saw an opportunity and took it. Your son is successful, lonely, and has a mother with money. Do you know how rare that combination is? Michael sank into a chair, his face white with shock. You don't love me. Love. Isabella laughed, and the sound was nothing like the warm laughter I'd heard from her for 2 years. Michael, love doesn't pay for houses like this. Love doesn't fund comfortable retirements or secure futures. The money from my house sale, I said, understanding flooding through me. That was never about helping you buy a home. $43,000 was a good start, but it was never the real goal. You have over $200,000 in your retirement accounts, Madeline, plus the life insurance money from your husband that you've barely touched. That's what made this whole charade worthwhile. I felt sick. You researched me. You planned this. I researched both of you. Michael's promotion last year got written up in the business journal. Successful engineer, recently divorced, close relationship with his widowed mother who owns property and has substantial savings. It was like reading a shopping list. Michael was shaking his head back and forth. 2 years. We've been married for almost 2 years. You've lived with me, slept next to me, met my friends. And it was the longest con I've ever run, Isabella said. Usually I'm gone within 8 months. But your mother was cautious. She needed more time to trust me completely. How many others? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Others what? Other husbands? Other families? She shrugged. You're not my first, if that's what you're asking. The front doorbell rang, and Isabella's head snapped toward the sound. For the first time since this conversation started, she looked genuinely concerned. Expecting someone, Madeline? I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. Through the front window, we could all see Ethan's car in the driveway, and behind it, a police car. Isabella moved fast, grabbing her purse from the counter and heading toward the back door. But Michael caught her arm. You're not going anywhere, he said, and there was a strength in his voice I hadn't heard in months. Not until you explain everything. Let go of me, Michael.
No.
You owe us that much. I don't owe you anything. You got exactly what you paid for, a beautiful wife who made you feel important and loved. The fact that it wasn't real doesn't change how it felt. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Mom, go answer the door, Michael said, not taking his eyes off Isabella. I hurried to the front door and opened it to find Ethan standing there with a woman in a police uniform. Madeline, thank God. Is everyone okay? We're in the kitchen, I said, leading them inside. When Isabella saw the police officer, something shifted in her demeanor again. The coldness disappeared, replaced by tears that seemed to come from nowhere. Thank goodness you're here, she said to the officer. I think Michael's mother is having some kind of mental episode. She's been saying terrible things, accusing me of crimes I don't understand. I watched in amazement as she transformed back into the vulnerable young woman who had called me Mama Madeline for 2 years. Even knowing it was an act, it was convincing. Ma'am, I'm Detective Santos, the officer said calmly. I need everyone to take a seat, so we can sort this out. There's nothing to sort out, Isabella said, wiping her eyes. Madeline has been asking strange questions all evening, and then she started accusing me of being someone else. I think she might be confused. But Detective Santos was looking at a folder Ethan had handed her. Are you Isabella Torres? Of course I am. Can you show me some identification, please? Isabella hesitated for just a moment before reaching into her purse. She handed over a driver's license, but Detective Santos studied it carefully before looking back at her. This license was issued 6 months ago. Do you have anything older? Birth certificate? Passport? Social security card? I lost my purse in a robbery last year. I had to replace everything. I see. And where did you work before coming to Riverside Elementary? Another hesitation. I was substitute teaching in Colorado. After my parents died, I needed time to grieve before taking a permanent position. Detective Santos nodded sympathetically. That must have been difficult. What were your parents' names? Robert and Maria Torres. And when did they die? 3 years ago. A car accident on I-25 outside Denver. Detective Santos made notes while Isabella answered, but I could see she was comparing the responses to information in her folder. Mrs. Torres, I'm going to need you to come to the station with me to clear up some inconsistencies in your background check. What inconsistencies? Michael asked. What's in that folder? Ethan opened the folder and spread several documents on the kitchen table. Photographs, driver's licenses, and what looked like police reports. These are booking photos and marriage certificates for Catherine Morales, also known as Christine Martinez, also known as Carol Morgan. Same woman, different names, different husbands. Isabella stared at the documents, and I watched her decide whether to keep fighting or give up the pretense entirely. How many? She asked finally. How many what? Detective Santos replied. How many did you find? 7 marriages in 4 states over the past 8 years. Total financial damage over $400,000. Michael was staring at the photographs. These are all you. Different hair, different clothes, but it's you. Isabella nodded slowly. Catherine Morales. That's my real name. And the others? The other husbands. What about them? Where are they now? Are they okay? For the first time, something that might have been genuine emotion crossed her face. They're fine. Broke but fine. I never hurt anyone physically. Just financially. Just emotionally. Michael's voice was flat. Just destroyed their ability to trust anyone ever again. That wasn't my intention. What was your intention? I asked. Catherine looked at me for a long moment. To survive. To have enough money to stop doing this someday. To find a place where I could be safe and comfortable without depending on anyone. By stealing from people who cared about you. By taking money from people who had more than they needed. Her voice was getting harder again. Do you know what it's like to have nothing, Madeline? To grow up in foster homes where nobody gives a damn if you live or die. To age out of the system at 18 with no family, no support, no way to pay for college or training or anything that might give you a legitimate chance. So you decided to become a predator. I decided to use the only asset I had. Men like Michael want to believe they're rescuing someone. They want to feel needed and important and generous. I gave them that feeling. You gave them lies. I gave them the relationship they wanted, even if it wasn't real. Everyone got something out of the deal. Detective Santos was putting the documents back in the folder. Mrs. Morales, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Elder abuse? Michael asked. The plan to access your mother's retirement funds, Ethan explained. Based on the timeline and the documents we found, she was working toward becoming your beneficiary and then arranging for your mother to have an accident. The room went completely silent. Michael was staring at Catherine with horror, while she looked almost relieved that the truth was finally out. You were going to kill me? I asked. Not personally, she said. And not right away. I needed more time to set everything up properly. But eventually, yes. I sat down hard, the reality of how close I'd come to losing everything finally hitting me. Not just my money, but my life. And Michael would have lost both his mother and his savings to a woman who had never felt anything real for him at all. As Detective Santos read Catherine Herite's, I watched my son staring at the woman he'd thought he loved. The woman he'd built his life around, bought a house with, planned a future with. The woman who had been planning his mother's murder while calling her Mama Madeline and accepting her hugs. "Michael," I said softly, "we're going to be okay." He looked at me with eyes that seemed much older than they had an hour ago.
How?
"How do we come back from this?" "The same way we always have. Together. One day at a time." Catherine was handcuffed now, but before they led her away, she turned back to us. "For what it's worth," she said, "you are the kindest mark I ever had. Both of you. If I had been capable of loving anyone, it might have been you." Then she was gone, leaving Michael and me alone in the kitchen of a house that had never really been his home, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life that had been built on lies. The weeks following Catherine's arrest felt like living in someone else's life. Every morning I woke up expecting to feel relief, but instead I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about trust and family and the people we let into our hearts. Michael was staying in a hotel while the house situation got sorted out, and I could see the confusion and hurt eating away at him day by day. Detective Santos called me on a Tuesday morning with news that made my stomach drop. "Madeline, we need you and Michael to come to the station. We've discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about Catherine's operation." When we arrived, the detective's desk was covered with files, photographs, and what looked like surveillance equipment. A man I didn't recognize was sitting in the corner, taking notes on a laptop. "This is Agent Rodriguez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit," Detective Santos explained. "Catherine Morales wasn't working alone, and your case isn't an isolated incident." Agent Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. Martinez, your decision to investigate Catherine may have helped us uncover the largest organized marriage fraud ring in the southwestern United States." He opened a folder and spread out photographs that made my blood run cold. Catherine, but with different hair, different clothes, standing next to different men in what were clearly wedding photos. Some looked like they'd been taken recently, others seemed older. 12 different identities that we've confirmed so far, Agent Rodriguez continued. 15 different marriages across 6 states. Combined theft of over $800,000. Michael was staring at the photos with an expression I couldn't read. "How long has she been doing this?" "Our earliest confirmed case dates back 11 years, but we suspect the operation goes back much further." I picked up one of the wedding photos, studying the face of the man standing beside Catherine. He looked happy, genuinely joyful, the same way Michael had looked on his wedding day.
What happened to them?
"The other husbands. That's what we need to talk to you about," Detective Santos said grimly. 3 of them are dead." The room went completely silent. Michael's face had gone white, and I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "Dead how?" I managed to ask. "Apparent accidents. Car crashes, a house fire, one drowning. All within 6 months of Catherine disappearing from their lives." "You think she killed them?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "We think someone did. The accidents were too convenient, too perfectly timed. And in each case, Catherine had recently convinced the victim to make her the beneficiary of substantial life insurance policies." I remembered the insurance forms Catherine had prepared for Michael to sign, how insistent she'd been that they complete the paperwork that very night, how she'd called it romantic to make each other beneficiaries. "She was planning to kill Michael," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth.
"We believe so, yes."
"But your investigation scared her off before she could complete her plan." Agent Rodriguez pulled out another file. "There's more. Catherine isn't the brains behind this operation. She's part of a larger network that includes identity forgers, financial facilitators, and what we can only call elimination specialists." "Elimination specialists," Michael repeated numbly. "People who arrange accidents. Professional killers, essentially, but ones who specialize in making murders look accidental." I felt like I was going to be sick. "How many people are involved in this?" "At least 8 that we've identified, possibly more. They target specific demographics, successful middle-aged men, preferably recently divorced or widowed, with substantial assets and elderly parents who have money." The pattern was so clear it was almost insulting. "They researched us like we were business opportunities."
Exactly.
"They have people who scan obituaries, business journals, real estate transactions, looking for potential targets. Once they identify someone, they spend months learning everything about them before making contact. Detective Santos opened another folder. Catherine's real name isn't Catherine Morales, by the way. It's Sarah Chun. She's 36, not 28 like she told Michael. She was recruited into this operation when she was in her early 20s, probably as a victim first. A victim? Michael asked. The organization has a pattern. They find young women in desperate circumstances, aging out of foster care, escaping abusive situations, struggling with addiction or debt. They offer them a way out, but once they're in, they can't get out. I thought about what Catherine had said about growing up in foster homes, about having nothing and no one. So some of her story was true. Parts of it, yes. But she's been trapped in this life for over a decade now. The organization doesn't let people retire voluntarily. What does that mean? I asked, though I was afraid. I already knew. It means Catherine was probably planning to disappear permanently after your case. Take the money and run, hoping they wouldn't track her down. Agent Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Here's where we need your help. Catherine has agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence and witness protection. But she'll only talk if she believes she and her sister will be safe from retaliation. She has a sister? Michael asked. A younger sister, Maria, who lives in Phoenix. Catherine has been sending money to support her and her children. According to Catherine, Maria doesn't know where the money comes from. I remembered the $15,000 that had been transferred to Phoenix, money Catherine had claimed was for student loans. She was supporting her family. In her mind, that justified everything else. But now she's terrified that cooperating with us will put Maria in danger. Detective Santos looked directly at me. Madeline, Catherine specifically asked to speak with you. She says you're the only person involved in this case who treated her like a human being, even after you knew what she was. I don't want to talk to her, Michael said immediately. I don't want to be in the same room with her ever again. I understand, Agent Rodriguez said. But Mrs. Martinez, your participation could help us take down an organization that has destroyed dozens of families and killed at least 3 innocent people. I thought about the other families who had gone through what we were experiencing. Other mothers who had given their life savings to help their children, only to watch it disappear into the pockets of professional predators. Other sons and daughters who had been manipulated into believing they'd found love when they'd actually found someone planning to kill them for insurance money. What would I need to do? I asked. Just listen to what she has to say. Help us understand the full scope of the operation. And maybe convince her that cooperating is the right thing to do. Michael grabbed my arm. Mom, you don't owe her anything. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, I said quietly. Not for her, but for all the families who haven't been targeted yet. If talking to her can prevent this from happening to other people, then I have to do it. 2 days later, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the county jail, waiting for them to bring Catherine in. Agent Rodriguez and Detective Santos were in an adjacent room, watching through a one-way mirror. My hands were shaking slightly, and I kept reminding myself that she was handcuffed and there were guards right outside the door. When they brought her in, I was shocked by how different she looked. Her hair was shorter, darker, and without makeup she appeared older and more tired. But it was her eyes that were the most changed. They held a wariness that hadn't been there before, as if she was constantly calculating potential threats. "Hello, Madeline," she said, sitting down across from me. Her voice was softer than I remembered, less performed. "Hello, Catherine. Or should I call you Sarah?" "Catherine is fine. I've been Catherine longer than I was Sarah." We sat in silence for a moment, studying each other across the metal table. Finally, she spoke again. "I want you to know that I never planned to hurt Michael physically. The insurance thing, the accidents, that wasn't supposed to happen with him. But it was going to happen." She nodded slowly. "Eventually. Once I had access to your money and had set everything up properly. But I kept delaying it because..." She paused, struggling with words. "Because I actually liked both of you. Liked us enough to steal from us and plan my murder. Liked you enough to feel guilty about it, which I'd never experienced before." I leaned forward slightly. "Catherine, Agent Rodriguez says you're willing to testify against the people who run this organization. If they can guarantee Maria's safety, yes. Tell me about Maria. Catherine's entire demeanor changed when she mentioned her sister. The calculation disappeared, replaced by something that looked like genuine love and concern. She's 28, has 3 kids, works 2 jobs trying to make ends meet. Her husband left when the youngest was born. She has no idea what I do for money. She thinks I work in hotel management and travel a lot for work. The money you sent her, that came from us. From you, from the others, yes. But Madeline, those kids have food and clothes and a decent place to live because of that money. Maria can afford daycare, so she can work. Her oldest is in a good school district. Built on lies and theft. Built on taking money from people who had more than they needed and giving it to people who were desperate. I stared at her for a long moment. Do you really believe that justifies what you've done? Catherine was quiet for nearly a minute before answering.
No.
But it made it possible for me to live with myself while I was doing it. Agent Rodriguez says there have been murders. That you were planning to have Michael killed. Not me personally. I don't hurt people physically. That's not what I do. But you set it up. You prepared the ground. Yes. How many others? How many other families have you destroyed? I don't know the exact number. I try not to think about it too much. It was easier to focus on the performance, on becoming whoever they needed me to be, than to think about the real people I was hurting. I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. We weren't performances to you, Catherine. We were people who cared about you. I worried about you when you seemed sad. I celebrated your achievements. I was planning to leave you some of my jewelry in my will because I wanted you to have something that had belonged to Michael's family. For the first time since she'd sat down, Catherine's composure cracked. Tears began running down her face, and her hands were trembling. I know, she whispered. I know you did, and I hated myself for it every single day. Then why didn't you stop? Because they don't let you stop. Because once you're in, the only way out is death or prison. And because I was good at it, and they made a lot of money from my operations. Who are they, Catherine? Who's running this? She looked around the room nervously, even though we were alone. There's a man who calls himself Marcus. I don't know his real name, but he's been running operations like this for at least 15 years. He recruits women like me, trains us, provides us with new identities and documentation. How many women? I know of at least 6 others currently active. Probably more that I've never met. And the men who arrange the accidents? Contractors. Marcus hires them when someone has gotten everything they can from a marriage and needs to disappear permanently. I felt sick thinking about how close Michael had come to becoming one of their victims. Why did you agree to cooperate? What changed your mind? Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her shackled hands. Honestly, you did. Me? The way you handled everything. The way you investigated without being cruel about it. The way you treated me like a person even after you knew what I was. I've never had anyone respond to discovering the truth about me with anything other than hatred or disgust. I was angry. I'm still angry. But you weren't vicious. And when I realized that Marcus was planning to have you killed regardless of whether I succeeded with Michael, I couldn't go through with it anymore. He was planning to kill me anyway? You were too suspicious, too smart. Even if I had managed to complete the Michael operation, Marcus was concerned that you would keep investigating and potentially expose other operations. So yes, you were marked for elimination regardless. The room felt colder suddenly. How close did I come? If you hadn't confronted me that night at dinner, if you had waited even a few more days to act on your suspicions, you would probably be dead right now. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the reality of how narrow my escape had been. Not just from financial ruin, but from murder. Catherine, if you testify against Marcus and this organization, what happens to you? Witness protection, probably. A new identity, a new life somewhere far away from here. I'll never be able to see Maria again, never be able to help support her kids. But you'll be alive.
Yes.
I'll be alive, and hopefully some other families won't have to go through what you and Michael did. I looked at this woman who had deceived me so completely, who had planned my death while calling me Mama Madeline, who had stolen my money while accepting my love. And despite everything, I found myself feeling something that might have been pity. What will you tell them? Agent Rodriguez and Detective Santos. Everything I know. Names, locations, methods, financial structures. All of it. Even though it might get you killed? Madeline, I'm 36 years old, and I've spent the last 14 years of my life pretending to be other people and destroying families. If I can use what I know to stop this organization, then maybe my life will have meant something beyond the damage I've caused. The guard knocked on the door, indicating that our time was up. As they prepared to take Catherine back to her cell, she turned to me one more time. Madeline, I need you to know something. When I called you Mama Madeline, when I hugged you and told you I was grateful to be part of your family, those weren't completely lies. Part of me really did wish they could be true. I know, I said quietly. And that makes it worse, not better. As they led her away, I sat alone in the conference room, trying to make sense of everything I'd learned. The woman who had nearly destroyed my family was also a victim of something larger and more evil than I'd imagined. That didn't excuse what she'd done to us, but it helped me understand how someone could become so lost that they'd mistake survival for living. Agent Rodriguez entered the room, looking hopeful. How did it go? She's going to cooperate, I said. She's going to tell you everything. Thank you, Madeline. What you did today is going to help save lives. I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the lives we might save. I was thinking about the life I'd almost lost, and how grateful I was for lawyers who work late and instincts that whisper warnings and sons who deserve better than the lies that nearly destroyed them. The real work of healing was just beginning. The FBI operation to take down Marcus and his network took 6 months to plan and execute. During that time, Michael and I tried to rebuild some kind of normal life, though normal felt like a foreign concept after everything we'd been through. He found a new apartment across town and started seeing a therapist to work through what Dr. Kim called betrayal trauma. I sold the house I'd bought after Catherine's arrest and moved into a senior living community where I didn't have to worry about lawn maintenance or home security. Agent Rodriguez kept us updated on the investigation's progress, though he couldn't share many details while the operation was active. What he did tell us was encouraging. Catherine's testimony had helped them identify 12 active operatives across 7 states, and they'd managed to prevent at least 3 planned murders by warning potential victims before the killers could act. Your decision to trust Catherine and encourage her cooperation has probably saved more lives than we'll ever be able to count, he told me during one of our regular check-ins. But the real measure of our recovery wasn't in the FBI's success stories. It was in the small moments when Michael laughed at something on television, or when I caught myself humming while cooking dinner, or when we could have a conversation that didn't somehow circle back to Catherine and the lies we'd lived with for 2 years. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon when Michael showed up at my door holding a newspaper and looking more animated than I'd seen him since before the arrest. "Mom, you need to see this," he said, spreading the paper across my kitchen table. The headline read, "Multi-State Marriage Fraud Ring Dismantled in Coordinated FBI Operation." Below it was a photo of several people in handcuffs being led into a courthouse, including a man the caption identified as Marcus Delano, the alleged ringleader. "They got him," I said, reading through the article quickly. "They got all of them." The article detailed how the FBI had used Catherine's testimony and cooperation to set up a complex sting operation that had resulted in 17 arrests across 6 states. The organization had been operating for over 20 years, with estimated damages in the millions of dollars and at least 8 confirmed murders. "Look at this part," Michael said, pointing to a paragraph near the end of the article. It says Catherine's cooperation was instrumental in identifying the victims and preventing additional planned murders. "She helped save people's lives, Mom." I read the section he indicated, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Catherine had done terrible things to our family, but she'd also found the courage to help stop others from experiencing the same trauma. "Agent Rodriguez wants to meet with us tomorrow," Michael continued. "He says there are some things he can tell us now that the arrests have been made." The next day, We sat in the same conference room where I'd first spoken with Catherine 6 months earlier. Agent Rodriguez looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd finally completed a job he'd been working on for years. First, I want you both to know that your family's cooperation was essential to this operation's success, he began. Without Catherine's testimony and your willingness to support her decision to cooperate, we never would have been able to identify and arrest the entire network. What happens to Catherine now? I asked. She's already in witness protection. New identity, new location, completely removed from any possibility of retaliation. She'll serve 18 months in minimum security as part of her plea agreement, and then she'll be free to start a new life. 18 months seems like a light sentence for what she did, Michael said. Under normal circumstances, I'd agree with you. But her cooperation prevented multiple murders and helped us recover over $2 million in stolen assets. The judge took that into account. Agent Rodriguez opened a file folder and pulled out several documents. Which brings me to some good news for your family. We've been able to trace and recover a significant portion of the money taken from your accounts. He handed us a financial statement that showed numbers I could barely believe. We recovered 87% of what was stolen from you, including the house down payment money and the funds transferred to Phoenix. Michael stared at the paperwork. This is more than we thought we'd lost. Catherine kept meticulous records of all her transactions, and Marcus's organization was surprisingly sloppy about hiding money trails once we knew where to look. You should have access to these funds within the next 30 days. I looked at the numbers, but they felt almost secondary to everything else we'd gained and lost through this experience. What about the other victims? The families of the men who were murdered. Some recoveries, though not as substantial as yours, because those operations were completed before the victims could take protective action. But every family will receive some restitution, and they'll have closure knowing their loved ones' killers are in prison. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. There's something else you both need to know. During our investigation, we discovered that Catherine had been trying to find a way out of the organization for several years before she met Michael. What do you mean? I asked. I looked at this woman who had deceived me so completely, who had planned my death while calling me Mama Madeline, who had stolen my money while accepting my love. And despite everything, I found myself feeling something that might have been pity. What will you tell them? Agent Rodriguez and Detective Santos. Everything I know. Names, locations, methods, financial structures. All of it. Even though it might get you killed? Madeline, I'm 36 years old, and I've spent the last 14 years of my life pretending to be other people and destroying families. If I can use what I know to stop this organization, then maybe my life will have meant something beyond the damage I've caused. The guard knocked on the door, indicating that our time was up. As they prepared to take Catherine back to her cell, she turned to me one more time. Madeline, I need you to know something. When I called you Mama Madeline, when I hugged you and told you I was grateful to be part of your family, those weren't completely lies. Part of me really did wish they could be true. I know, I said quietly. And that makes it worse, not better. As they led her away, I sat alone in the conference room, trying to make sense of everything I'd learned. The woman who had nearly destroyed my family was also a victim of something larger and more evil than I'd imagined. That didn't excuse what she'd done to us, but it helped me understand how someone could become so lost that they'd mistake survival for living. Agent Rodriguez entered the room, looking hopeful. How did it go? She's going to cooperate, I said. She's going to tell you everything. Thank you, Madeline. What you did today is going to help save lives. I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the lives we might save. I was thinking about the life I'd almost lost, and how grateful I was for lawyers who work late and instincts that whisper warnings and sons who deserve better than the lies that nearly destroy them. The real work of healing was just beginning. The FBI operation to take down Marcus and his network took 6 months to plan and execute. During that time, Michael and I tried to rebuild some kind of normal life, though normal felt like a foreign concept after everything we'd been through. He found a new apartment across town and started seeing a therapist to work through what Dr. Kim called betrayal trauma. I sold the house I'd bought after Catherine's arrest and moved into a senior living community where I didn't have to worry about lawn maintenance or home security. Agent Rodriguez kept us updated on the investigation's progress, though he couldn't share many details while the operation was active. What he did tell us was encouraging. Catherine's testimony had helped them identify 12 active operatives across 7 states, and they'd managed to prevent at least 3 planned murders by warning potential victims before the killers could act. Your decision to trust Catherine and encourage her cooperation has probably saved more lives than we'll ever be able to count, he told me during one of our regular check-ins. But the real measure of our recovery wasn't in the FBI's success stories. It was in the small moments when Michael laughed at something on television, or when I caught myself humming while cooking dinner, or when we could have a conversation that didn't somehow circle back to Catherine and the lies we'd lived with for 2 years. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon when Michael showed up at my door holding a newspaper and looking more animated than I'd seen him since before the arrest. "Mom, you need to see this," he said, spreading the paper across my kitchen table. The headline read, "Multi-State Marriage Fraud Ring Dismantled in Coordinated FBI Operation." Below it was a photo of several people in handcuffs being led into a courthouse, including a man the caption identified as Marcus Delano, the alleged ringleader. "They got him," I said, reading through the article quickly. "They got all of them." The article detailed how the FBI had used Catherine's testimony and cooperation to set up a complex sting operation that had resulted in 17 arrests across 6 states. The organization had been operating for over 20 years, with estimated damages in the millions of dollars and at least 8 confirmed murders. "Look at this part," Michael said, pointing to a paragraph near the end of the article. It says Catherine's cooperation was instrumental in identifying the victims and preventing additional planned murders. "She helped save people's lives, Mom." I read the section he indicated, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Catherine had done terrible things to our family, but she'd also found the courage to help stop others from experiencing the same trauma. "Agent Rodriguez wants to meet with us tomorrow," Michael continued. "He says there are some things he can tell us now that the arrests have been made." The next day, we sat in the same conference room where I'd first spoken with Catherine 6 months earlier. Agent Rodriguez looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd finally completed a job he'd been working on for years. "First, I want you both to know that your family's cooperation was essential to this operation's success," he began. "Without Catherine's testimony and your willingness to support her decision to cooperate, we never would have been able to identify and arrest the entire network." "What happens to Catherine now?" I asked. "She's already in witness protection. New identity, new location, completely removed from any possibility of retaliation. She'll serve 18 months in minimum security as part of her plea agreement, and then she'll be free to start a new life." 18 months seems like a light sentence for what she did, Michael said. "Under normal circumstances, I'd agree with you. But her cooperation prevented multiple murders and helped us recover over $2 million in stolen assets." The judge took that into account. Agent Rodriguez opened a file folder and pulled out several documents. "Which brings me to some good news for your family. We've been able to trace and recover a significant portion of the money taken from your accounts." He handed us a financial statement that showed numbers I could barely believe. "We recovered 87% of what was stolen from you, including the house down payment money and the funds transferred to Phoenix." Michael stared at the paperwork. "This is more than we thought we'd lost." Catherine kept meticulous records of all her transactions, and Marcus's organization was surprisingly sloppy about hiding money trails once we knew where to look. "You should have access to these funds within the next 30 days. I looked at the numbers, but they felt almost secondary to everything else we'd gained and lost through this experience." "What about the other victims? The families of the men who were murdered?" "Some recoveries, though not as substantial as yours, because those operations were completed before the victims could take protective action. But every family will receive some restitution, and they'll have closure knowing their loved ones' killers are in prison." Agent Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "There's something else you both need to know. During our investigation, we discovered that Catherine had been trying to find a way out of the organization for several years before she met Michael." "What do you mean?"
I asked.
I thought about Catherine somewhere far away under a new name, teaching someone to read, or helping a woman escape from danger. I thought about the families who would never experience what we'd experienced because the FBI had shut down Marcus's operation. I thought about Michael learning to trust again with someone who deserved that trust. Most of all, I thought about resilience, how people can survive terrible deceptions and still choose to believe in love, how families can be broken and heal stronger than before, how even the people who hurt us can sometimes find ways to heal themselves and help others. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Thanks for dinner. Jennifer thinks you're wonderful. So do I." I smiled and typed back. "She seems lovely. Bring her again next week." As I got ready for bed, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw Madeline Foster. Not a victim, not a fool who'd been taken advantage of, but a woman who'd faced a terrible situation with courage and intelligence and had come out stronger on the other side. That was enough. That was everything. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. If this story touched you or reminded you to trust your instincts about the people in your life, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your voice matters and your story matters too. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is listen to that small voice inside us that says something isn't right, even when everyone else seems convinced everything is fine.